Okay, the last lecture we were talking about coral reef systems. So coral reef systems are important for Malaysia because it is not only a hotspot for marine biodiversity, which means it is a center where there is the diversity is very high, and most of the organisms have not really been studied. Okay, so it is also a tourist attraction, earning tourist money. So other than coral reef systems in Malaysia, we are tropical and a tropical ecosystem. So we have mangrove forests. Okay, mangrove forests. So mangrove forests are mainly between the latitudes of 25° north and 25° south. So it is a tropical forest. Okay, but it is a salt tolerant forest. So most of the trees are able to tolerate the salt in the sea. So that's why their niche is in the coastal area uh, between the sea and land. Okay, but here it's written here in low wave energy habitats. Low wave energy because you need to give the mangrove seeds a chance to grow, to establish and grow. But once they establish themselves, uh, the mangrove forests are actually quite important. Okay, so mangrove forests. So if you remember, in 2004, during the uh, Great Tsunami, there were reports of how mangrove forests actually dissipated the energy from the waves in Penang and in Phuket, Thailand, and also in Kedah. So areas where there is a where there's healthy mangrove forest, the wave energy was able to be to be absorbed by the mangrove forest. But initially, in order for the mangrove forest to establish themselves, you need a low wave energy habitat. Okay, so mangrove forests are made up of trees that are salt tolerant. So uh, inevitably, they have a lower diversity compared to terrestrial forests because high salts in the sea is actually a detriment to many plants. Okay, so not many can grow there. That's why the diversity is low. So although the mangrove forest has low diversity, now we know that it is actually very productive. Although it has low diversity, it is still very productive. Okay, that's why it is important. Later on, when you learn the food web systems here, you'll know that it is important for the ecosystem functioning in coastal waters. Okay, so the main the main trees, mangrove trees in our mangrove forests are rhizopora. Okay, these are with the prop root. These are the initial colonizers. Okay, so they will be the ones that establish themselves first, grow first. So when 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 the when the Rhizopora trees start growing. Because of their roots, they slow down the waves. And because they slow down the waves, there's more soil accretion, which means more soil will be built up in the coastal lands. Okay, so you have to remember, you have to understand the terms accretion and erosion. So erosion, erosion means the soil is being eroded away from the coastline. So you have less and less coast. Less and less, uh, less and less coast. Okay, eroded by the waves. Okay, accretion is the opposite. Accretion is where soil is deposited. Okay, soil is deposited on the coastline and allows the coastline to grow, the coastal area to grow. So that's once the rhizopora establish itself, the prop roots, the roots will slow down the waves, slow down the wave energy, allowing more soil to accrete. So there will be more accretion. The the forest actually will start growing, okay, growing outward into the sea because of these initial colonizers. So as it grows outward, you have other trees starting to colonize. Some of them are Sonoracia. Sonoracia has a pneumatophore. So this is another initial colonizer. Then the one that is usually found inland, are the Avicennia. So they also have a pneumatophore. They have larger leaves and larger breeding roots than Sonoracia. Okay. So Rhizopora are the ones with the prop roots. Okay. So they have prop roots. They are the initial colonizers. So they are the ones that you usually find at the fringe of the mangrove forest. But as you go inside, you'll start seeing other trees, Sonoracia with their pneumatophore. So these are roots for breathing. Okay, so these roots prop out of the mangrove soil to allow the roots to breathe. Okay, so you also have the inland, your Avicennia. Avicennia has both the prop roots and the pneumatophore, but the pneumatophore are usually very much bigger than the ones you can see in Sonoracia. Okay, so initially when they were measuring the productivity of mangrove forest, so we know that mangrove forest has low diversity. Okay, but when they were measuring the productivity of the mangrove forest, they were collecting the leaves that fall, then estimating how many leaves must be produced to replace the leaves that fell. Okay, and they also measure uh, primary production rates used on the plants. However, most of the initial estimates were low because they underestimated the underground biomass, the below ground biomass. Okay, what does this mean? When you see a tree, you see its trunk, you see its branches, you see its leaves. Okay, but you do not see its roots inside the soil, under the soil. Okay, underground. You don't see the network of roots that a mangrove tree have. Okay, so there is a problem. Uh, how much how much of the mangrove biomass is actually below ground? Okay, so how did we reach this number over total? The ratio of below ground biomass over total plant biomass can reach 50%. That means when you see the tree, you are only about seeing uh, two-thirds of the tree. One-third of the tree is actually below ground. Okay, so how did we know this 50% uh, value here? So forest is located coastline of Perak. Okay, so it is a forest reserve, and it is considered to be the world's only sustainable mangrove forest. Sustainable because the forest management, uh, forest park management will allow harvesting of the mangrove forest, but alternating places and controlled. So they allow the trees to grow before they allow harvesting in that forest again. That's why it is considered the world's uh, only sustainable mangrove forest. Okay, so we have good mangrove forest management for the parks. So we also have good mangrove scientists from University Malaya, University Science Malaysia. So one team from USM actually what they did was they removed one whole tree, one whole mangrove tree together with the roots and everything. They did it carefully to ensure that they didn't break any roots and all that. So you can imagine how difficult it was to dug up one whole mangrove tree. Okay. So once they did that, they measured the biomass below ground, and they found that it can actually be up to 50% of what you can see above ground. Okay, so that was a lot of work done to achieve this number. Okay, so we have roots, radiating table roots, little nutritive roots, and pneumatophore that collects oxygen for the plants. Okay, so what these root systems do is they provide a filtering system. So uh, usually, if you look at the good transect, a natural transect from the coastline to the sea, the mangroves are the initial filtering system. Okay, so they'll filter whatever human activity produce, like rubbish, nutrients, all this. Then after mangrove forest, we have seagrass. Seagrass is the next filtering system. It removes the nutrients further. Okay. Then after seagrass, you have your pristine coral reef systems. So this is a natural healthy transect, which means uh, the best solution for a natural ecosystem is where you have mangroves, seagrass, and coral reef systems. Okay, so each one will help each other in order to maintain a healthy ecosystem. Okay. So the mangrove the roots will also remove the sediments. Okay, because you know that sediments are detrimental to coral reefs. So not when the roots slow down the wave movements, it not only removes the soil, the sediments, it also allows accretion of the coastline. Okay, okay. So mangroves now not only also protect the coastal area from tsunami, from other strong waves, it also helps prevent salt inundation, which means prevent the salt water from the sea going into the coastal area. Because most of the coastal area are plantation or paddy field, so when they if the salt water comes in, it will destroy the plantation or paddy field. Okay, so the factors affecting mangrove distribution. So temperature only in tropics and subtropics. So we already mentioned that the distribution is usually between 25° north and 25° south. So these are considered the tropic and subtropic area. Okay, salinity. So salinity, it affects the growth of other plants, so allowing the mangrove forest to thrive because they are the ones that can tolerate salt. So other plants cannot compete. Only the mangrove forest will predominate. Okay. But then you have rain, runoff, evaporation that affects the salt concentration in these waters. So if that's why sometimes when you build dams, you reduce the water flow. When you reduce the water flow, the water becomes saltier. But when the water becomes saltier, the mangroves also cannot expand. Okay, cannot thrive. Cannot grow more because although the mangrove plants can tolerate salt, they still need fresh water to grow. Okay, they still need fresh water. Okay, so building of big dams that disturb the water flow will eventually uh, disturb the habitats downstream. Okay, because the river flow will influence the salt concentration in the seawater. I mean, in the estuarine or coastal waters. What are the importance of mangroves? So mangroves are primary producers. So you know that primary producers are the base of the food web. So in the um, in the mangrove forest, the mangrove trees are the main primary producer. They are the base of the food web. So they are very important. Then they have roots. Okay, they have roots that actually provide a good nursery for the juvenile fish, prawns and crabs, because these juvenile fish, prawns and crabs, they are vulnerable to predators. Okay, so if they are in the open ocean, they will be easily eaten up by the predators. But when they are in the mangrove forest, they can hide between among the roots. They can hide from the predators. That's why mangrove forests are considered an important nursery for juvenile fishes, prawns, and crabs. Okay, so mangroves are also important to foster land accretion. So I've told you this before. So, so, but the problem, like we have problems with soil erosion on our east coast of Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, so why don't we just plant the trees, make a mangrove forest, and then that will solve the problem. But then you realize that it is not as that easy. Okay, first thing you need you need the trees to establish themselves. So we have scientists that tried to plant trees and it doesn't work. Okay, they try. If the forest is already established, if you plant them, if you replenish, you plant the juvenile mangrove trees, it will work. But if you try to establish a new mangrove forest, it is very, very difficult. I have yet to hear of any successful uh, um, mangrove forest that was planted by humans. Okay, because there are too many factors involved. You need to have fresh water supply. you have to ensure that the wave energy is low enough so that the the trees can establish themselves. Okay, so if you are able to overcome, if you are able to grow, if you're able to have a good healthy mangrove forest, then you are able to protect the shoreline. Okay, you will be able to control floods and storm surges. Okay, so mangrove forests are also filters for nutrients and pollutants, and they also provide shelter, wood, fuel, and other natural products. So the mangrove trees, their trunks are actually used for for charcoal. They are also used for to build piers. Okay, uh, jetties and piers, the small ones. Then mangrove forest can also be a form of a recreational ecotourism site where you can educate the people about the importance of mangroves. Okay, so we know that Malaysia has mangrove forests. We know the importance of mangrove forests. Okay, so what are the food webs related to mangrove forests? So here it's important to note that there are two types of food webs in the mangrove forest. One is your grazing food web. The other is your detritus food web. Okay, there are two types. One is the grazing food web. The other is the detritus food web. So both of this, uh, they are not exclusive, but they work. They are present together. Okay, so both of them are there together. So grazing food webs include direct herbivory on plant tissue. Okay, so you have the mangrove tree. So sometimes you have uh, bivalves or nematodes that actually graze on the algae on the plant tissue itself. Okay, so these are direct grazing on the plant itself. Okay, so this is the grazing food web. So the other one is the detritus food web. So the detritus food web is the more important one because the detritus food web is not based on the tree directly, but the leaves that fall from the tree, the branches that break off from the tree. So these are all considered detritus. So they fall to the ground and then they support the detritus food web. Okay. So, but mangrove leaves, most leaves have tannins. Okay. So tannins are considered antimicrobial. Okay. So when the leaves fall, they are not immediately utilized by animals because of the tannins. Okay. But these tannins will leach out from the leaves, okay, within the first 2 weeks. Okay. So when the tannins are being leached out, as the tannin concentration goes down, the microbial degradation starts. For leaves, of course, you know that fungi is more important because fungi have enzymes that can degrade uh, the lignin and cellulose. Okay, when you have microbes growing, okay, for the fungi to degrade the leaves, the fungi have to attach itself to the leaf. By attaching itself to the leaf, it is changing the carbon nitrogen ratio of itself, the detritus. Okay, because bacteria and fungi has a higher concentration, a higher ratio of nitrogen to carbon. With time, the carbon to nitrogen ratio of the detritus will decrease because the N component increases. Okay, so that's how the microbial degradation of the leaves begin. So, so the degradation begins either on land, or it can be underground. If it's underground, it is usually helped by the crabs, Sesarma species. Okay, so crabs, mangrove crabs, what do? Once the leaves fall, they'll start cutting up the leaves. Then bring the leaves down to their hole, breathing hole. Okay, then they will catch it on the wall of the holes to allow microbial degradation. Okay, so crabs can consume or hide 30 to 80% of the detritus. So crabs play an important role. Okay. So this is the detritus food web. So you have uh, once the leaves are processed by the microbes, so the tannin concentration is low, the nitrogen ratio is higher, so it's more nutritious. And then you have your snails, you have your crabs, you have other organisms that start eating them. Then this will support the fish, and then support the birds, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is the detritus food web. So this is more important than the grazing food web, because in mangrove forests, a lot of the biomass production is uh, lost as detritus, which means the leaves that grow, they will drop and fall to the mangrove floor. Okay, so this shows the how the leaves are processed by the fungi, bacteria, and then eaten up by the different secondary consumers. Okay, primary consumers and then secondary consumers here. The secondary consumers are usually the birds. Okay, birds are larger fish. Okay, so this is the detritus food web. So the composition continues through microbial and fungal decay. So remember, tannins must be leached also. Okay, tannins are leached out of the leaves also. So once the microbial and fungal decay of the leaf detritus is progressing well, then other invertebrates come into play. You have your small size invertebrates, you have your worms, then from here, then later on you have your worms, mollusks, prawns, and crabs. Then later on, large fish, birds of prey. Okay, so these are the different trophic levels in a detritus food web. Okay, so the Batang Mangrove Forest is an important site. Okay, so it is also an important migratory uh, site. So a lot of birds actually use the forest during migration. So if you are interested in birds, you should go there and have a look. Okay, but you should know when to go. So this is the so usually if you want to go there, you have to go to Kuala Sepetang. Last time they called it Port Well, but they changed the name to Kuala Sepetang. Okay, so this is the Matang Mangrove Forest.